Questions that pertain to the basics of journalism and the breakdown thereof should be addressed by professors and professionals practicing journalism. One of the things that's happened is that a lot of people have begun to complain because even though they didn't take courses that taught them the basics of news reporting or the elements of journalism, they recognize without knowing exactly what's wrong that something is wrong with mainstream journalism. That much of it has become a commercial for a power structure that is anarchistic towards accumulation of its own control and destructive towards everyone else. And this didn't begin with Donald Trump by any means. It largely began with the Kennedy assassination. It pertains to something that has been adopted across the board. You find that there are certain issues like the temerity and impunity of Israel that makes a dividing line between the left and right. But people who are defending Gaza, many of them are sandbaggers. By sandbaggers, I mean they were silent about the issues that pertain to the AIDS attack, for example, or the Kennedy assassination. They don't care to defend Kennedy. They're anti-imperialist, even though Kennedy was largely anti-imperialist, and are tired of the United States or America, and often give Russia the benefit of the doubt. None of that is necessary. What you need to see, I think, is that the idea of establishing a narrative is what is at root in what has happened. And you can see this very clearly from the Kennedy assassination. Let's talk a minute about the way that it has become almost a shibboleth, a sort of folklore figure of presumption that Kennedy's assassination will never be solved. It's like it almost has a ghost story element to it because they've established a narrative about Oswald. They've established a narrative about Oswald by going about constructing a fabricated reality and making it rubber stamped as real. And this, of course, was a great challenge to them, which has never been investigated. And although I dispute the idea that the Kennedy assassination cannot be solved, I believe it can be solved if you're willing to look at the chain of evidence, for example. The possession of the rifle was in the house of Michael Payne. These are certain connect the dot issues that people refuse to go about. It's like there's a story called the Three Sillies, and there's three sisters, and they're weeping and wailing because there's a hatchet in the ceiling. And they say, "What if it falls? What if it falls?" And the manager comes over and pulls the hatchet out and says, "It won't fall. We'll just take it and put it somewhere safe." And they stop weeping and wailing. Well, if you follow the evidence, you actually can solve the Kennedy assassination. But I think what's really at root is that people don't want to solve the idea behind the Kennedy assassination. Aha, that's what really scares them because they want the narrative established that it can't be solved because it helps them deal with not wanting to know the solution. For example, the index system that's at work is represented by Dan Rather, who you could say beams down from Star Trek. After all, Melvin Belly, Jack Ruby's attorney, appeared on Star Trek. And John Wayne it was photographed with Lee Harvey Oswald. And George Takei of Star Trek starred with John Wayne in the Green Berets. So you could say Dan Rather started his career telling us that the film he saw, the Zapruder film, which was then put away and nobody saw for years and years, for a decade, when Dick Gregory got it out in the 70s for Dick Cavett with a lawsuit. He told us Kennedy's head goes violently forwards. This was the idea of telling the opposite of the truth, but you would, quote, rather believe. That's the index. It's the preferential system of substituting what you would rather believe with what is real. And this comes from Hollywood. And its origins are in Fayum, a counterfeiting den, run by Gabriel D'Annunzio in the early 20th century, where the great dictators got together with D.W. Griffith, founder of American epic cinema. So the Hollywood studio system in the era of the great dictators got off the ground in a counterfeiting den. And this is rooted in Fayum. And the idea of reality being plastic that you can manipulate into whatever people believe is baked into the idea behind the Kennedy assassination, that people would rather believe in the bullet over the ballot. They would rather believe in the firm hand. They would rather believe in the redneck revolver, underlying hope, undercutting change. Folklore but strange. The towny boys, the redneck boys. They would rather believe in the Old Testament God, the Texas school book, in a word. So the establishing a narrative comes into play also in combating investigation. There was an Oswald the Rabbit, which was based on the cartoon opportunities of the early Disney age, and it was disputed whether it was the inspiration of Mickey Mouse or vice versa. It's important to understand that there's a relevance to the fact that the second Disneyland opened on November 22nd, 1963, because Disney traces back to the Fayum crowd. He was friends with Sergei Eisenstein, who was the Russian epic filmmaker, the Russian counterpart of D.W. Griffith. And Oswald, of course, was scurrying like a lucky rabbit back and forth between Russia and Dallas, Russia and New Orleans and Texas. So you have this complicated double identity. There's a double fantasy going on. And you have this story about me, who Jimmy is the unlucky rabbit of Leslie Sonetta Katz, the token of liberty leading the people. She says no to Jim. She bares her breast and says no to Jimmy. And he's the unlucky rabbit. He shrinky poos and cries because he's the unlucky rabbit. Now let's look factually at what Whitemaker did with Gail Burst and Israel Katz, Peter Gabriel and Paul McCartney, Elizabeth Taylor, Hitler, Reagan, and Donald Trump. Imagine that you have a child who is hit in the head with shrapnel and is on a medical table and can't summon the power to speak to you. And she's surrounded by sadistic doctors. The sadistic doctors say, "We don't know what is wrong with you. Tell us what is wrong with you. You must tell us what is wrong with you." And the poor child can't speak. And so they say, well, then we're going to have to guess. And we need to understand Do you wish you were Oswald the Lucky Rabbit? And the police community and the journalistic community go on a treasure hunt to prove that the child wishes it was Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Well, we know who the Lucky Rabbit was. He was a kid named Ken from Swarthmore. Ken the Lucky Rabbit. But they come to gold dig. You know, Lennon used to say dig it, but he was actually saying dig your own grave, sucker. And you're supposed to rather be with the Beatles the way Jackie Onassis was rather be with the Beatles than with JFK. And the media will never allow proper evaluation of the Van Gogh in Butler or the whodunit of Donahue on my father's obituary because they've established a narrative. And the narrative's counterattack, its defense, is the question. Did the poor child who's been hit in the head wish he was Oswald the Lucky Rabbit? Did the unlucky rabbit dream of Guinevere, Billie Jean Guinevere, which is what they named their guinea pigs, Billie Jean, and they correlate Cain being shot to a starlet who was given working papers after she lost her virginity to seduce the unlucky rabbit. Because the only thing that can make you lucky is a virgin. Lucky, lucky, lucky you. You got a virgin. Aren't you lucky?